I used to think fairness was a candle we pass around the table, until the day I learned some people hide their hands. My name is Hannah. I am 34, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Tonight I am sitting at my small kitchen table with a glass of water and a folder that looks heavier than paper. I want to tell you about a sentence that broke my heart without raising its voice. It happened in a room where love is supposed to dress itself up as gratitude and patience. It happened when the will was read. If you are new here, this channel is where I talk about betrayals that grow roots inside a family. I do not name or dox anyone. I am not here to make a bonfire of people I still pray for. I bring you facts, feelings, and a plan that refuses to throw gasoline on grief. I make room for receipts, for boundaries, and for the kind of revenge that cuts clean, not deep. At the end, I will ask you for your judgment. If you were me, would you do what I did? The morning of the reading. Phoenix was the color of a copper penny. Heat rose off the streets in slow waves that made distant things wobble. I wore a navy dress that belonged to a version of me who believed that good clothes can make hard things behave. I arrived early, because that is my charm and my curse. The law office smelled like lemon cleaner and the polite kind of money. There were framed degrees that hung on the walls like promises. There was a bowl of mints that looked like tiny moons. My older brother Nathan came in exactly on time, which is how he lives his life. My younger sister Faith was 12 minutes late and arrived with that whirlwind energy that makes strangers forgive her and family forget the cost. My Aunt Lydia sat in the corner with a purse that could have carried a small library. She had the look of someone who has decided where the moral high ground is and intends to build a house there. The attorney, a woman with kind eyes and a voice that could smooth gravel, invited us into a conference room. She introduced herself as Ms. Patel. She folded her hands and said the phrase that always sounds simple until it is not. We are here to honor the wishes of your late father. I need to tell you about my father for a minute, because context is not garnish. He was a mechanic who believed in the holiness of torque and the theology of keeping your word. He could fix anything with a socket wrench and 3 hours of patience. He loved us in a language that looked like showing up early and leaving the light on. He also loved my sister Faith with a gentleness that sometimes made the rest of us feel like background music, which is a mean thing to say about a man who worked 2 jobs to keep the air conditioner running, but a true thing to say about how a house feels when one room is always warmer. Miss Patel began. There was the usual litany small bequests of sentimental items, instructions for personal letters, the practical arrangements. Then she turned a page and the air in the room seemed to thin. To my daughter Faith, I leave the house on Maple Street and the insurance policy in full. To my son Nathan, I leave the workshop and the truck, free of any lien. To my daughter Hannah, I leave my books and my blessing. My blessing. If you have ever been handed a word instead of a thing, you know the way the floor can move without moving, Ms. Patel kept reading. Because her job is to finish sentences, not mend hearts. My Aunt Lydia shifted in her chair in a way that said she already knew. Nathan stared at the table like it had told him a joke he did not understand. Faith squeezed my hand with absent sweetness and whispered, "We will share." Okay, as if she were a saint and not the beneficiary. I sat there and let the sentence live inside my chest. I leave my books and my blessing. I am a woman who pays attention to words. I collect them the way some people collect stamps or salt shakers. That sentence did not feel like love. It felt like being told that the candle of fairness had gone out while I was washing the dishes. I thanked Ms. Patel. I am polite even when I am on fire. We signed things. We took copies. We walked to the parking lot where the sun made every car look like an accusation. Faith hugged me and said that Dad always told her the house would be hers. She said it like an apology and a victory dressed in the same outfit. Nathan said he would help me move the books. He meant well. I drove home with the air conditioner on full and the radio off. There is a quiet that only comes when you realize a story you have been living was not the story written in the drawer. I went into my apartment, set the folder on the table, and stared at the plant in the window that refuses to die even when I forget to water it. Faith withholds and still thrives. I laughed once, sharp, at my own metaphor. Then I cried in that way where you make almost no sound, but your body knows you are breaking. Here is the part where I tell you the human truth, not the pretty one. I was jealous. I was angry at my father for loving unevenly, even in death. I was angry at my sister for receiving a crown she did not ask for and did not decline. I was angry at myself for being the kind of woman who thought being responsible for years would automatically write my name on the right line. That anger tasted like old pennies and hot asphalt and the shame of being 34 and feeling like a child who did not get enough cake. I made tea because tea is a ritual that lets us pretend we are making a choice. I opened the folder. There were copies of the will and a stapled attachment called a codicil. A codicil is a late change, a little door added after the blueprint is complete. The date on the codicil was from the month my father started chemo. It named Faith the sole beneficiary of the house and the insurance. It said the workshop would go to Nathan because he had the hands for it. It said my name and the word blessing. I felt a question rise that was not rage. It was clarity. Had my father made this choice with a clear mind and a full set of facts? Or had someone rearranged the furniture while he was asleep on the couch? I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am not a heroine in a made-for-television drama. I am a woman who has learned that love needs paperwork. I decided to ask for the paperwork. This is where the hook closes around the heart. Betrayal inside a family does not always wear the clothes of theft or cruelty. Sometimes it dresses up as duty. Sometimes it speaks in the soft tone of a child who says, "I will handle it," and then handles it in a way that leaves you with a blessing and a box of paperbacks. Before I go further, I want you to know how I felt about my sister in that moment. I loved her. I have always loved her. When we were little, I tied her shoes and taught her to ride a bike in the parking lot behind the laundromat where Mom worked the early shift. I also wanted to take her by the shoulders and shake until the crown slipped. I did neither. I turned to the thing that has saved me again and again when the world tries to make me choose between rage and surrender. I turned to a plan. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook, because 3 is a number my brain trusts. Line 1, find out who prepared the codicil and who was present. Line 2, request the medical records around that date for capacity. Line 3, create a response that is sharp and safe and leaves room for repentance. My revenge would not be a scream into the phone or a spectacle on social media. It would be a legal light switched on in a room that had gone dim. I called Miss Patel the next morning and asked for a meeting with the files. She said of course, and there was something in her tone that made me think she had been waiting for me to ask. She is a careful woman. Careful women notice things and store them until the right question opens the drawer. I want you with me in this, not as an audience hungry for scandal, but as a circle of witnesses who believe that justice and gentleness can share a chair. I want you to hear the steps as I take them. I want your counsel at the end. If you were me, would you have swallowed the blessing and called it enough? Would you have trusted the crown to share itself without a contract? Or would you have followed the paper trail to the place where love must meet law? Ms. Patel's office looks the way you want an office to look when the ground under you is shifting polished wood. Tidy files. A plant that is not dramatic about being alive. She offered me water and a seat by the window. I pulled the file. She said, tapping a brown folder with a blue fastener. Before we begin, Hannah, I want to say your father spoke of you with pride, whatever the paper says today. That remains. I felt the sentence land in the tender place where compliments and cautions shake hands. Thank you, I said, and meant it. She opened the folder. Your father executed his original will 5 years ago, she began. That version divided assets equally, the house to be sold with proceeds split, the workshop to be sold or kept by mutual agreement, the life insurance divided in thirds. The codicil she slid a thinner document forward was added 14 months ago. The date glowed at me like the LED of a hospital monitor. Month 1 of chemo. Who was present? I asked. Your father. Myself. Our notary, she said. He was accompanied here by your sister, Faith, who waited in the reception area. Did he seem clear? I asked, feeling both brave and disloyal. Ms. Patel picked up her pen and placed it down again without clicking it. A deliberate choice. I am not a physician, but I do not notarize signatures when I suspect incapacity. Your father was oriented. He was tired and thinner than before. But he understood the changes. She tapped the codicil, and he described his intent. She paused. He said he wanted Faith to have the house because she would likely start a family first, and because Nathan had asked for the workshop. He said you were good with money and life, and would be fine. The phrase scratched down my ribs like a zipper. Good with money and life, a compliment that doubles as a reason to leave you last. I took a breath that felt like I was borrowing oxygen from next week. Did he say why the insurance too? I asked. He said the mortgage would need paying and the insurance would make it simple, she replied. He also said he trusted you to take what you needed from his library, his words, not mine. I stared at the codicil. The ink did not smudge when I blinked. May I request copies of any notes and the notary log? I asked. Of course, Ms. Patel said. And Hannah, there is something else. She pulled a smaller paper-clipped packet. At the time of signing, your father signed a letter of wishes, non-binding. She handed it over. It was 1 page, handwritten. My father's careful block letters. Hannah, you know the price of air conditioner coils and brake pads. You know how to stretch a paycheck without snapping it. If the house is Faith's, I would like her to invite you to live there if you wish, with no rent for the first year, my hope. Not a rule. Nathan, keep your hands on the tools. Faith, listen to your sister about budgets. She is not strict. She is right. I love you all. Do not let my decisions be your excuse to stop being kind. The letter burned with love and blindness in equal measure. A wish where a clause should have been. An invitation without a doorknob. Non-binding. Ms. Patel repeated softly, as if reading my mind. It can guide, not compel. I put the letter back in the folder with the reverence you give a relic from a faith you have not entirely left. I want to request medical records around that month, I said. Capacity notes, oncology visits, any palliative consults. You may, she said. You will need to petition as an interested party. I can draft the request. I also want to inspect the title of the house, I continued, and insurance beneficiary designations to confirm dates. She nodded, already reaching for a legal pad. We will verify that the codicil's intentions were reflected across the instruments. It happens more than you think that a will says one thing and a beneficiary form another. A small, fierce hope flickered, not a victory, but a glitch with a path. Last, I said. I want to propose a family agreement if the documents hold that turns Dad's wish into terms. I will not litigate a war I cannot live in, but I will not be left with a blessing wrapped around silence. Ms. Patel's mouth did a quick, private smile. Like a teacher watching a student choose the right wrench, an occupancy and stewardship agreement, she said. Writing the title at the top of the pad, 1 year rent-free, then fair market contribution or an equity earn-in for maintenance, shared decision rules for sale or refinance, household budget transparency. It can be loving and legally literate at the same time. Exactly, I said, my voice steadier, on the drive home. I thought about fairness as a candle again. Maybe fairness is not a candle after all. Maybe it's a lamp with a switch and rules about who gets to touch the switch when. Maybe you stop expecting people to pass it gently and instead wire the room correctly. That night I called Nathan. My brother's voice always sounds like low tide steady, a little melancholy, trustworthy. I told him what Ms. Patel had said. He exhaled the way men exhale when they've been trying not to be the ref in a game they didn't ask to play. I didn't know about the insurance, he said. I knew about the workshop. He asked me. I said yes, because I thought you'd get the house split. I'm sorry. It's not yours to be sorry for, I said. But I need you with me on the agreement. Dad's letter asks Faith to invite me into the house for a year. We're going to make that real on paper, not in hope. After that. Contributions or equity credits for what I fix, and rules for if she wants to sell. I'm with you, he said without hesitation. I'll co-sign the fairness. I'll also fix whatever breaks while you're there, if she tries to nickel and dime you. I smiled, crying anyway. Thank you. Then I called Faith. She answered on the third ring, breathless, like she had been running toward a story she wanted to tell. "I was just about to call you," she said. "I started sorting Dad's books for you. I made Stack's car manuals, mystery novels, the ones with the gold edges he used to read on Sundays." "Thank you," I said. "I also met with Ms. Patel. The codicil stands. There's also a letter from Dad asking you to invite me to live in the house for a year rent-free. I want to turn that into a written agreement that protects both of us." Silence, then the lightest laugh, her white flag laugh. "Hannah, do we need paperwork for everything?" she asked, trying to keep it playful. "Dad needed chemo for everything once he got sick," I replied softly. "Sometimes care is comprehensive because the facts are. Paperwork is care when people are grieving." She sighed, and I pictured her on the edge of her bed twisting a ring she sometimes wears on a chain. "Send me what you want to sign," she said. "I'll look. Thank you," I said. "And Faith, this is not me trying to take your house. This is me making sure we don't lose each other inside your house." That night, in my quiet apartment, I drafted the occupancy and stewardship agreement. The headings were simple on purpose to honor Dad's wishes and keep the sisters sisters. Term 12 months from move-in date. Option to extend by mutual consent. Rent $0 during term. Utilities shared proportionally by usage. Stewardship. Hannah may perform necessary maintenance up to a set amount per month. Costs documented. Amounts convert to equity credit if house is sold within 5 years. Decisions. Any upgrades over a threshold require mutual approval in writing. Privacy. Separate bedrooms. Shared calendar for guests. No surprise entries. Exit. If either party wants out early. 60 days notice. Fair settlement of costs. Dispute mediation with a third party before anyone says words they can't take back. I emailed it to Ms. Patel for polish, then to Faith and Nathan with a note that said, "Clarity is kindness. Let's be kind." Before sleep pulled me like a tide, I opened the box where I keep small relics of good sense, a receipt for the first oil change I paid with my own money, a sticky note with Dad's handwriting. "Check the gasket twice. It's always the gasket." I added a new card. In my handwriting, "Love people. Paper the plan. If you were me, would you be doing this? Would you insist on a written year in the house when pride wants you to refuse the key? Would you ask for equity credit, not as payment, but as proof that the story has rules? Or would you take your father's blessing like a poem and try to build a porch with it? The house on Maple Street looks smaller without my father standing in the doorway, wiping his hands on a shop rag and asking if I've eaten. Phoenix Light has a habit of being honest, even when no one invited it to be, and that afternoon it was pouring through the front windows, laying every dust line and scuff in clear relief. Faith unlocked the door and did that little hostess pivot that says, "Welcome to something I'm still getting used to." "I made tea," she said, "and I cleared the dining table. We can sign there." Nathan arrived with a tool bag and a face that said he'd rather be fixing a hinge than a family. I put the agreement folder down next to a small vase of daisies that had already given up on pretending to be fresh. On the wall. Our childhood photos were still in their old frames. Nathan, in a jacket 2 sizes too big on his first day at the garage. Me with a haircut I thought looked like a news anchor. Faith on the front steps with a popsicle that had surrendered to gravity. I told myself to breathe the way Miss Patel had reminded me, in through the nose, out through the mouth, like you're cooling a spoon. We took a slow lap around the house first. It wasn't a real inspection, just the kind people do when grief is still shaping the threshold. In the living room. Dad's recliner sat like a faithful dog, not sure where its person had gone. In the hallway, the paint had a new square of a slightly different white where a calendar had been. In the kitchen, the corkboard by the phone still held rubber-banded takeout menus, a flyer for a church car wash, and a business card for a mobile notary with a handwritten note, "Friday, bring IDs." The date on the card was 2 days before the codicil. It could have been for anything. We are a family that notarizes titles for used trucks and permission slips for road trips. Still, my eye stuck to it the way your tongue seeks a sore tooth. Underneath the card was a torn pharmacy printout with medication instructions from the oncology clinic lorazepam. New dosage. Take 30 minutes before treatment. The timestamp was the same day as the codicil. None of it was proof. All of it was context. I took photos with my phone, not sneaky right there in the kitchen light, then looked at my sister. "I'm not building a case against you," I said gently. "I'm building a picture of the day so I know which questions to ask and which to let go." She nodded, a quick dip of her chin that meant both thanks and hurry. "Let's sign," she said. At the table, I slid the occupancy and stewardship agreement between us. Nathan sat at the head, not as a judge, just a brace. We read it out loud on purpose, so that the words would live in the air as well as on paper. "Purpose," I said, "to honor Dad's wishes and keep the sisters sisters." Faith's mouth twitched at the line. "Okay," she said. "Yes." We moved down the clauses, tweaking a number here, a word there. We adjusted utilities from proportional by usage to even split with quarterly true-up. Because the air conditioner is a god in this city, and fairness needs math, we set a monthly maintenance ceiling I could spend without asking small fixes. Safety issues. The gasket. Dad would say it always is above which we'd text and sign a one-page addendum. We added a shared Google Calendar for guests and blocked dates so the house could rest. For the exit clause, we agreed to 60 days' notice and a worksheet Ms. Patel had drafted to settle costs like civilized people: what was spent, what was saved, what was sweat equity versus a weekend of repainting. When we got to the equity credit, Faith hesitated. "If you repair things, why should that become equity later?" she asked. Her tone wasn't hostile, just honest, the kind of honest that keeps sisters from becoming polite strangers. "Because otherwise," I answered, "I am just free labor with a gratitude tax. This lets me care for the bones without being used by them. If you keep the house for more than 5 years, the credit dissolves. If you sell within 5, the credit becomes a line item we calculate, not an argument we have at midnight with a for sale sign in the yard." Nathan grinned despite himself. "That sounded like Dad," he said, "the midnight argument part." We initialed the margins where we'd changed things. We signed the last page, then switched and signed again. I slid the copies into plastic sleeves and put one in Faith's hand. "Paper for the plan," I said, "so our memories don't have to do the work alone." She hugged me, and for a moment we were just two girls in a kitchen where someone always had a tool to fix whatever needed fixing. "Stay tonight," she said. "Your room is still your room." We carried a few boxes from my car books, framed receipts I keep like charms against foolishness. A small lamp with a shade that makes light look like it knows what it's doing. In my old room, I opened the window half an inch the way Dad taught me so the house could breathe. On the dresser, Faith had placed a stack of paperbacks tied with twine. On top was a folded note in Dad's handwriting. "For you," it said, "start with the ones that made you argue with me in a good way." I sat on the edge of the bed and let my throat ache softly. The window pulled in a strand of neighborhood noise, somebody's radio, a kid's laugh, a dog insisting on being understood. At dinner, we ate grocery store rotisserie chicken and a salad that had too much cucumber, because the store had been out of the little tomatoes that pretend they taste like summer. We talked about normal things on purpose, Nathan's new apprentice, who had a gift for diagnosing engine noises. Faith's plan to swap the living room rug for something that didn't audition as Velcro for pet hair. When we were washing dishes, the kitchen corkboard kept tugging at me, the way a painting does when you realize a small detail is a clue and not an accident. "Where'd the wall calendar go?" I asked casually. "The paint's different under it." Faith glanced over. "I took it down to wipe it," she said. "It had that dust outline. I tossed it. It was last year's." "Do you still have the pages?" I asked. "I'd love to put the birthdays in my phone." She reached into the drawer by the stove, the one where every family has a tangle of batteries, rubber bands, and stamps that have seen better adhesives, and pulled out a curled stack. I flipped through. July had a star on the date of the codicil, and a penciled note in my Aunt Lydia's handwriting, Ms. P at 2. "Bring IDs, I'll drive." The day before had oncologist med update and the pharmacy's initials. None of this was a smoking gun. All of it was a map. Nathan whistled low when he saw Aunt Lydia's note. "She didn't mention driving," he said. "She didn't mention a lot," I replied without heat. "The truth is a temperature you can live at if you practice." We set the calendar pages aside. I texted myself a photo of July with a caption, "Ask Ms. P about who sat where. Ask the oncologist about capacity note template. Ask Aunt L why she wrote bring IDs in her handwriting for a meeting she wasn't in." That night, after Faith went to bed, Nathan and I sat on the back steps breathing air that still held the day's heat like a secret. "You're thinking about capacity," he said. "I'm thinking about influence," I answered. "Not illegal, necessarily, but pressure, timing, the way the drugs make time move like syrup. Dad could have been clear enough to sign and still fogged enough to be steered." Nathan nodded. "Lydia's not a villain," he said, "but she does love a steering wheel." "I'm not out to make her one," I said. "I just need the record to show what the weather was that day, if the weather included sedatives. And a very certain aunt, and a very tired man. Then I want the law to work with that context. Even if the codicil stands, I want the beneficiary designations looked at with daylight. If there's a mismatch, we fix it. If there's not, we build our life inside the lines and make new lines where we can." He leaned his shoulder against mine. The old way we used to sit when we shared secrets about the first people who had the ability to break our hearts and didn't deserve it. "I'm in," he said. In the morning, I drove to a coffee shop near the oncology clinic and drafted 2 letters, one to the hospital's records department requesting capacity notes and medication logs for the codicil week, the other to the insurance company requesting date-stamped beneficiary forms. Ms. Patel had already sent me the correct language. I did not accuse anyone of anything. I did not use adjectives like suspicious. I said, "To ensure Dad's wishes were executed with full information, please provide." Then I ordered a second coffee because bravery sometimes tastes like caffeine. I also drafted a 3rd letter, this one to Aunt Lydia. "Dear Aunt L," I wrote, "I saw your note on the calendar about driving Dad the day he signed the codicil. I'm grateful you helped him. I'm compiling a timeline so that our memories don't have to hold all the details. Could you tell me what you remember about the appointments, who was where, and what Dad said on the drive home?" I added, "I am not preparing a fight. I am preparing a record." Then I put a small heart because language isn't only for court, it's also for blood. By lunch, she called. "Hannah," she said, skipping hello. "Are you building a case against your sister?" "I'm building a case for clarity," I said evenly. "That's a case that helps Faith, too." She huffed the sound of a woman rearranging her argument. "I drove him because your mother asked and because Faith was at work," she said. "He asked me to make sure the notary was ready because he didn't want to sit around. He was tired." She emphasized tired the way people do when they want you to understand how much weight they carried, not what kind. "Do you recall any medication changes that week?" I asked. "Of course," she said, as if that were the same as not worth mentioning. "They had him on something to help with the nausea and the nerves. He was clearer than you'd think." "Hannah." "He told Ms. Patel exactly what he wanted. He told me on the way home, too." "What did he tell you?" I asked. "That he knew you'd be fine," she said, gentle and proud and oblivious to the cut. "He said you're the steady one. He said Faith would need the roof more." I thanked her. After we hung up, I sat at the dining table and let both truths sit side by side, Dad's love and Dad's blind spot, Aunt Lydia's helpfulness and her certainty, my sister's good intentions and her comfort with benefits she hadn't earned. I did not have to pick a villain to pick a plan. By the end of the week, Ms. Patel called with the first return. The life insurance company had faxed the beneficiary form, date stamped, Faith's name listed as 100% primary. The date matched the codicil month, but the form had been submitted 3 weeks earlier. "These things happen," Ms. Patel said. "People change the beneficiary first because it's a single form, then come in and update the will." "Who submitted it?" I asked. "Owner signed," she said, "mailed from your father's address." That night, I walked through the house alone. I paused at the workbench in the garage where Dad used to keep an old coffee can full of screws of every possible size, because the answer is always a screw if you're willing to look long enough. The can was still there, labeled in black marker, "Not trash." I laughed. A quiet, grateful sound that surprised me. I touched the can like a relic, and then went inside to the kitchen and looked at the corkboard again. The mobile notary card had a phone number. I stared at it and then dialed. Not to interrogate, but to ask if she kept logs of appointments. She did. She confirmed she had come to our house once, not the law office, to notarize a power of attorney update for medical decisions earlier that same month. The names on the POA were exactly the ones I feared and hoped to hear Faith primary. Nathan alternate. Not me. I asked her. Do you recall Dad's condition? She said. He was weak but lucid. He joked about the pen being too heavy. I thanked her. I told her she had a kind job on hard days. Here is where I tell you the feeling that shocked me. Relief. Not that I was left out. Not that the forms favored Faith. Relief that the paper had a shape I could see. My father, imperfect. Trying had not left a tangle born purely of someone else's will. He had made choices with the information and love he had. The choices hurt. They also gave me a map, and maps can be amended with addenda that do not require arson. When I went back to my room, the light was soft in the way Phoenix sometimes offers as an apology for noon, on my pillow. Faith had left a little note, I'm glad you're here. I don't know how to do this without you. Under it, she'd put one of Dad's bookmarks, a strip of masking tape folded over the top of a page that said in his handwriting, Proof matters. Feelings, too. I held both in my hand until they warmed. If you were me, would you keep pressing for capacity notes now that you know the beneficiary change predates the codicil? Would you accept the paper as Dad's flawed attempt at love and turn all your energy toward building the best life inside the agreement you forged? Would you ask Aunt Lydia to write a statement for the file so the future doesn't morph into a myth? Or would you go to court because the word blessing still burns when you touch it? The records arrived on a Monday morning that smelled like wet concrete and coffee. Ms. Patel emailed me with the subject line 2 words that have never meant so much and yet so little at the same time, records enclosed. I opened the attachment slowly, like they might hiss. Capacity notes from the oncology clinic, medication logs, a palliative care consult summary. The handwriting was tidy. The sentences were factual in the way that can feel polite and merciless. On the day of the codicil, the attending wrote patient-oriented, understands diagnosis and treatment plan, fatigued but engaged. Lorazepam recently adjusted for pre-treatment anxiety. Low dose, no evidence of delirium. The social worker note added, patient speaks highly of adult children, identifies daughter Faith as likely point of contact for medical matters, expresses confidence in daughter Hannah's financial skills, son Nathan to assist with practical tasks. No smoking gun, no dark arrow pointing at manipulation. A record of a man trying to make choices in a body that was betraying him while he believed the best story of each of us. I let the notes sit in my chest. It is possible to want a contradiction so badly that you miss the power of a clear page. The documents did not give me grounds to tear anything down. They gave me a foundation to build on without inventing enemies. Ms. Patel called at noon. I have read everything, she said. We can petition for a brief hearing to enter your occupancy and stewardship agreement into the court file as a stipulated arrangement among heirs. It is not necessary, but it will help later if a bank ever asks, or if an extended relative becomes a historian with a memory problem. It also gives a judge an opportunity to say out loud that your father's non-binding wish is now a binding term you all chose with open eyes. Will that upset Faith? I asked. It should reassure her, Ms. Patel replied. Paper protects the current owner as much as the occupant. No one is sneaking expectations in later. That afternoon, I sat with Faith at the Maple Street dining table and explained the plan. I did not add adjectives. I did not season the truth with guilt. The agreement becomes part of the estate file, I said. If you ever refinance, the lender will not blink if you sell within 5 years. My equity credit travels with the paperwork, not our feelings. If you keep the house beyond 5 years, the credit dissolves, as we already wrote, and the story becomes simple again. Faith traced the rim of her mug for a moment. Okay, she said finally. I am still learning how to live with paper. I used to think love made paper unnecessary. I'm starting to see that love without paper makes memory do too much work. We went to court on a Thursday. It was a small courtroom, the kind that gets used for traffic matters and name changes. The judge was a woman with a steady face and a voice like a good metronome. Ms. Patel spoke with the elegance of someone who has said versions of this many times and still knows which words to choose as if for the first time. She explained that the will and codicil were valid, that the beneficiary designation was already executed by the insurance carrier, and that the heirs had chosen to formalize an occupancy and stewardship agreement to honor the decedent's expressed wish while protecting all parties. The judge asked us each one question, "Do you understand? And do you agree?" We each said yes. The judge signed an order that attached our agreement to the file. Then she did something I did not expect. She looked directly at Faith and then at me, and she said, "Your father's letter was a love note and an assignment. You have turned it into a plan. Grief will still do what grief does, but this will keep your house from becoming a courtroom later. Good work." Outside the courtroom, Aunt Lydia waited on a wooden bench like a verdict that could walk. I had not told her about the hearing. Miss Patel had given notice to the necessary parties, and that did not include the extended chorus. Yet there she was, purse in lap, ready to audition for a role. "Well," she said, rising, "was that entirely necessary?" "It was exactly necessary," I answered gently. "You will sleep better too, Aunt Elle, every time you worry about whether Dad's wish got lost in the shuffle. You can picture a judge signing it into our story." She pressed her lips together in what I have come to accept is her way of not apologizing while still staying in the scene. "He wanted you to be fine," she said finally. "I think he believed contracts were for people he did not love." "I think he forgot that contracts are for people we love most," I replied, "so that love is not the only witness." Nathan walked us to the parking lot with that quiet bodyguard energy he inherited from Dad. He said almost nothing, which is not the same as saying nothing. Sometimes the most important sentence is your presence. Back at the house on Maple Street, daily life began to braid itself around the paper. I moved in with my books and my lamp and the framed oil change receipt that makes me braver than I should admit. We created a guest calendar on the fridge, a grocery list by the sink, and a budget sheet that lived in a folder labeled House, not Hannah. The difference mattered. I did small fixes, the kind you do because you cannot not do them if you are wired like me. A sticking door, a dripping faucet, a smoke detector that had been begging for attention in the voice only a 9-volt battery can use. I logged expenses and cannily. I counted sweat equity, as we had agreed, not out of greed, but out of respect for my time. Faith did her version of labor. She folded laundry while watching shows Dad would have rolled his eyes at. She made a chore chart that she kept at for 3 weeks and then hung as art because it was too pretty to be functional. She put fresh flowers on the table when she could, and if they died quick in the Phoenix heat. She did not make a speech about the metaphor. That was my job. There were hard days. Grief sneaks in under doors the paper cannot seal. One morning I found her crying in the garage with the coffee can that says, "Not trash." Another night I snapped about the thermostat like a mother in a comic strip you keep reading because it keeps being true. We apologized faster than we used to. The rules gave us a place to stand while we said the uncomfortable sentence without falling through the floor. A week after the hearing, the insurance payout posted to Faith's account. She came to the table holding a bank printout, face flushed with responsibility. "I want to do this right," she said. "Dad said the insurance was to make the mortgage simple. I can pay the mortgage off, or I can keep a large cushion and invest some. I do not want to make a good mistake loudly." "Pay the mortgage," I said without looking at Nathan, because I knew what he would say, and I was right. He said, "Pay the mortgage," if we disagreed. We would have run the numbers. We did not. Sometimes the right answer does not need a calculator because it has a father's voice behind it saying, "Do the simple, honest thing first." Faith paid the mortgage. The bank sent a letter with language so elegant it felt like it should be read aloud by someone wearing a tuxedo. Lien released, free and clear. We made copies. We put one in the house folder and one under the magnet that used to hold a takeout menu for a pizza place that had gone out of business the year before. The fridge looked better with paper that mattered. There was one more decision that mattered more than the ink it took to write it. We opened a separate account titled House Maintenance. Faith seeded it with a portion of what remained from the insurance after taxes and mortgage. We set a rule for transfers and dual approvals for withdrawals, with monthly statements printed and placed in the folder. It was boring in the way that makes sleeping easier. I could feel my nervous system learn a new habit: silence where vigilance used to be. 2 weeks later, Aunt Lydia came by with iced tea and a face that admitted she missed my father out loud and off script. She stood in the kitchen studying the corkboard like it might misbehave. "I heard you went to court," she said, which in our family is a confession that someone else already told her. "We did," I said. "It helped." She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote down what I remember of that week," she said. "You asked me to write a statement for your file. I listened to myself talk to you on the phone and heard the holes. This fills some." I took the letter without inspecting Victory. We do not gloat in our house when someone joins the plan. We set another plate. In her statement, she wrote that she had indeed driven Dad to Ms. Patel's office, that she had waited in the car reading a magazine while he met with the attorney, that he had spoken on the way home about wanting to reduce decisions for his daughters because he feared arguments would turn love into something else. She wrote that he thought I was built for weather and wanted the house to be a kind of umbrella for Faith. She wrote that if she overstepped anywhere, it was in thinking her certainty could carry everyone safely. She wrote, "I am sorry for confusing my confidence with the right to steer." I put the letter in the file and felt something soften in my back that had been braced since the day the will was read. Forgiveness is not approval. It is the release of a job you are not qualified to do anymore. Namely, being Time's editor. One evening, as the heat finally broke, Faith and I sat on the front steps with 2 glasses of water and the relief of a day spent doing small, honest work. She said, "Do you hate me?" And the question was not melodrama, it was logistics. People build houses on lies like no and on vague hopes like someday. We do not. "No," I said. I hated the paper for a minute. I hated the timing. I hated the way Dad's love divided into more than math. I hated the way blessing tasted when I was hungry for something you could put in a bank. But you accepted the plan. You sign where it matters. You tell the truth early. That is all I asked. The rest is weather. She reached for my hand and left it there. No squeeze. No theme music. Sometimes the scene does not need a flourish. It needs a hand where your hand is. Recovery is never a montage scored to an uplifting song. It is a calendar. It is a sync. It is receipts that are not trying to tell a dramatic story. Only a clear one. Months stacked into a steady column. We repaired what needed repairing. We argued small and even, not large and theatrical. Nathan came by each Saturday morning with coffee and a tool you do not buy until you have already lived through the reasons you need it. Our home folder grew in weight and calm. That is a paradox no one warns you about. Calm has weight. I found myself reading my father's books with a new hunger, not the manuals, though I learned from those too, but the ones with underlines in pencil that looked like his voice reaching out. He had annotated a passage in a book about stewardship that said, "Love does not promise to keep you from weather. It promises to stand with you when the weather teaches you what the roof is for." He had written in the margin, "Roof equals plan." I wrote beneath his note, "Plan equals paper." I also found myself filming this story for you in a new way. Not breathless, not furious, not whispering. I sat you at my table and showed you the forms. I played you the voicemail from the court clerk saying, "Order signed." I read you the sentence Ms. Patel underlined in the judge's order. The court recognizes the attached agreement as the chosen method by which the heirs will honor the decedent's intention without further burdening the estate. I told you my anger had not been a sin. It had been a signal. I told you I pursued records not because I wanted to indict someone, but because I wanted to make the story carryable. You flooded the comments with versions of the same grace. You made accountability sound like love. Teach us. One day in the late afternoon, Faith brought me a stack of mail. On top was the final statement from the mortgage company with a very satisfying 0. Under it was a tax notice and a reminder to check the air filter. I opened the air vent and slid a new filter in with a little reverence. Dust is honest. It tells you where you have been breathing. "While I worked," Faith said. "When the year is up, will you stay?" I do not know, I said. We wrote a clause for that on purpose. We can check in every 3 months and see how the house feels. If it is good, we write an extension. If one of us needs a new shape of life, we write a notice and leave as friends with a ledger and not a wound. She smiled at that. I am learning that a ledger can be a love letter when it is written with both names, she said. We ate dinner with Nathan at the dining table. We told a story about Dad that we had told every year since we were tall enough to see over countertops. In the story, he misdiagnosed a rattling engine as hunger and fed it a sandwich as a joke. It is not a great joke. It is our joke. We laughed until we coughed. Then we washed dishes with that piece of people who have paid what they owed and named what they needed and turned a wish into a rule. A month later, Ms. Patel sent me a polite email that felt almost like a benediction. She had recorded a memorandum with the county recorder's office referencing our agreement in the estate file. No lien, no encumbrance, just a breadcrumb for any future title search. If Aunt Lydia ever wrote a book about our family and tried to bridle the truth with nostalgia, the clerk's stamp would sit there in the archive like a chaperone who does not sleep. There was one last conversation I needed to have, and I had avoided it because sometimes finishing a story is more frightening than living in the middle. I drove to the cemetery on a morning that had not yet learned the word blistering. I sat on the edge of the bench near Dad's marker and said the things you say when you know the person cannot answer, but you need to hear your mouth admit them. I did not get the house. Dad, I said, I got your books and your blessing and a plan I made with my sister and my brother and a judge. I got more paperwork than a person should be proud of. I got a roof I helped hold up. I got to turn your wish into a contract. You could have done some of this differently. You could have written one more paragraph. You did not. I forgave you while asking you to do better in me. That is my revenge. I loved you with structure. A breeze moved the leaves enough to make a soft noise that may have been a bird, may have been the city, may have been nothing at all. I counted it as permission. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought a new set of labels for the house folder. The old ones worked, the new ones were cleaner. I stood at the dining table and peeled and placed them with care. Bills, requests, agreements, notes, stewardship credits, court order, maintenance account. It looked like a map and a prayer. That evening, as the sun slipped and Phoenix remembered how to be gentle, I opened the living room curtains all the way. Light is not the same as forgiveness, but sometimes it acts like it is. Faith came to stand beside me with 2 mugs of tea we would forget to drink hot. Nathan toggled the window fan and said it sounded like the belt might need a look, which is as close as he gets to saying I love you in a language our father invented. I turned on the camera and spoke to you, the audience that became witnesses, and then something like a circle of neighbors. I promised a revenge that would be sharp and safe and leave a scar you can live with. I said, here it is. I followed the paper where it led. I did not turn my sister into a villain. I did not turn my aunt into a monster. I did not let my father's blessing be an empty bowl. I went to a bank and a lawyer and a judge. I turned a letter into a law inside our house. If you are in a story like this, remember 2 sentences. 1, love needs paperwork. 2, clarity is kindness dressed like work. If you had been me, would you have asked for medical records even after the beneficiary form matched the codicil month? Would you have gone to court for a short hearing to attach a family agreement an attorney could have simply notarized? Would you have paid the mortgage with the insurance or played a smarter market? Tell me. I will be in the comments, not as a martyr, not as a judge, but as a woman who learned that blessings are not currency until you make them negotiable with ink. Later that night, I found a sticky note fallen behind a bookshelf, likely from a time when Dad wanted to remind himself how to fix something he had always known how to fix. In his block letters, check the gasket twice. It is always the gasket. I put it on the corkboard above the mobile notary's card, above Aunt Lydia's letter, above the court order copy. I wrote underneath it in my own hand, check the plan twice. It is always the plan. I slept well. The house did too.